I'm Michael Lahota, and you're watching After 24. And with us, we have Christian Boris, who is the founder of St. Javelin. Can you tell us a little bit about what St. Javelin is?
The St. Javelin started as just a sticker. So there was one sticker, and the whole idea was,
Sticker.
yeah, it was this. So I literally stole this meme. This meme existed before the war started. It existed, I think it was like 2018. So the guy who drew this is an artist, American artist named Chris Shaw, and initially, instead of the Javelin, it was a Kalashnikov, and it was called Madonna Kalashnikov. So he exhibited that art in like across the U.S. or whatever,
Yeah.
right? And then as a joke, somebody replaced it with the Javelin. And then in February, I knew about this because it was like a very niche thing in like amongst journalists and people who have watched the war since 2014, right?
Yeah.
And somebody told me that they printed stickers of it and they had it on their laptop. They sent it out to some friends and stuff. And I was basically like, well, I can do that. And then I can sell a few of them and like raise that money and then donate it to help us help. So that was the plan. And the plan was like 100 stickers, right? It was like, I thought $500 would be amazing. And then I put it up on Instagram. A bunch of people said, I want it. So I started a site that night. It was like 11:30 on, I think it was February 16th. And as soon as I put it up, we had like 2 sales that night. And then the next day I woke up and it was like $1,000 that day. And the next day it was like $5,000. And then it just started like building momentum like crazy, because at that time in the news, there was no other story but Ukraine, right?
Yeah.
Like COVID was basically gone. Like nobody wanted to talk about COVID anymore.
We joke about that in Ukraine. We're like, we really enjoyed the 2 weeks between COVID and the war.
yeah. Somebody told me that as soon as the war started, it was like COVID just magically disappeared.
Yeah,
right?
pretty much.
But yeah, it started as just a very like innocent attempt to do something, because I knew from talking to my friends in group chats who are journalists and analysts and military experts and all that, they were 99.9% confident that this was going to happen. And I believed them. And it just brought me back to like the work that I was doing in Ukraine all those years ago. And I wanted to do something. And nobody ever could have expected what it became. Right?
So, right. One question. You said you started it on like February 16th. Like,
Yeah.
What was the reasoning, like starting it then? Was it just like the buildup of like intensity and just everything was just kind of like?
So I think the first time that the White House sounded the alarm was October 2021. So prior to that, I think in April 2021, people were saying, hey, the Russians are amassing troops and whatnot, which was a pattern the whole time that I was a journalist from 2014. Like every summer, it became a joke that like, hey, it's this summer the Russians are going to invade, right?
Yeah.
There was always the talk of like they're going to go for Mariupol and all that, and like it happened so frequently that it became like impossible to think that it was possible, right?
Yeah.
But then in April they massed a lot of troops, but then they sent them all back. So it was almost like a precursor to what you saw in October, because in October they started sending tanks and BTRs and troops to different locations along the border, but they weren't coming back.
Yeah.
So that's when people said, oh, this might actually be the real thing, right? Like, and then it just got progressively worse and worse and worse. And then by February, it was the drumbeat of war was so strong that the people who I trusted said, yes, this is going to happen. So I just wanted to do like, again, I never expected anything like this, but I just wanted to do something small, right?
Yeah, small.
For me back then, like $500 of donations was big. And now it's like that.
It's like daily,
Yeah.
like not like every minute,
yeah.
probably.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, you were a journalist in Ukraine, like back when everything started in 2014. It has now probably become like the most documented war ever. Because like even with that said, you're seeing like soldiers, everyone has a phone, but they're also like they're taking photos and videos of literally everything that's happening, basically to like show the world like what is happening. But they're also showing like a lot of restraint because there's like sort of that gap. They don't want people to like correct fire and whatever. So they have all that in social media. Like, how do you see that sort of changing like the space of like information war?
I think that that's the reason why this exists, is because, so I don't know, it's just a theory, but I think that basically what happened is that those guys in the trenches showing you that they still have a sense of humor while this horrific shit is going on around them, while they're literally in the midst of the worst thing you can ever imagine, you know, artillery going off all around you, and they're on their phones making jokes. That, seeing that, I think opened up the reality to people who'd never experienced that before. Like, I'd seen that because I was a journalist, so I knew how there is humor in those situations, right? There's like, it's very dark and whatever, but I think people latched onto that because they saw that it allowed them to be part of it, right? Seeing that those soldiers and volunteers and activists and stuff, they were still like making jokes, that allowed them to participate. And I think it made people understand that, hey, like, humor's a powerful thing, right? And that's basically what powers this. It's just like, we can troll the Russians and like make fun of them all the time, and it really is like a big morale boost, right? We get soldiers all the time messaging and saying like, hey, I saw your meme or whatever. Like, I have guys all the time who are like, that was fucking hilarious, right? And it's like, you can't quantify what that means to them or anything like that, or how does that help the war or them perform or whatever, but it does something. So but yeah, I think it might be the most documented war, and it's crazy what
like
the footage
I think
is
so. Like everyone's running around with phones and their guns, so it's like,
and all the drone footage and all that sort of, like, you've never seen anything like that before, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I genuinely think that like, that's why it became such a social media war, is those guys first started it.
Okay. Like on the flip side of that, there's a lot of people who are like, they're sort of like looking at the memes and being like, I feel like this belittles Ukraine's efforts or something like that. Like, what do you think about those people? Or that opinion?
I think that people fail to see the bigger picture, I guess. It's like, this thing that we do and the memes and everything, it expands what's happening to such a bigger audience, because memes are how people talk on the internet, right?
Yeah.
Like, so many people, it went from, hey, I read full articles in newspapers, then people just read headlines on like Reddit or whatever, Twitter, and they don't read the article. And then it just became like memes, right? Like, you can get a whole story from a single meme or whatever. And not to trash articles or journalism, obviously, like, that's super important, but most people just don't have the time to read a 1,000-piece article and like retain that information and all that sort of stuff. So I think the reality is, like, memes have helped Ukraine tremendously, and like, you look at the Ministry of Defense and like what they've done with their Twitter account and all that, like, they've really used humor as like a significant weapon to keep people engaged and involved and caring about Ukraine. Like, if Ukraine didn't master this, people wouldn't be on their side as much as they are, because like, you see how Ukraine's resisted, and you want to be a part of that, right? There's a whole other side, obviously, where people think it's like disgusting and like whatever,
blah, blah.
But I think it's played a significant role, and I don't know, if you're offended by it, like, so be it. You can't make everybody happy, right?
What kind of tangible effects do you see coming out of like the memes?
Money. I mean, we literally bought $180,000 in winter jackets and sleeping bags yesterday. Like, the amount of we're over $2 million in
total?
Things that we've in direct donations, or things that we've purchased, like winter jackets, sleeping bags, cars, trucks, donations to like 2402, which is a fund that helps train journalists so that like more of this information about what's happening can get out, right? That was one of the first things we did. We donated to 2402, and they bought like bulletproof vests and helmets and IFAKs so journalists could actually stay safe and like tell these stories, right? Leads to money, and it leads to people being engaged, and then like other people who are important and decision makers jump on board, and that opens up a whole other pool of resources that like we have no access to that, right? Like what we've done is like a drop in the bucket, but it's amazing to see who is potentially impacted in even the smallest way by like the things that we do and all these other organizations do with memes and just like the information side of it, right?
So like make Biden laugh and then he sends HIMARS.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like that's maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but maybe not such an exaggeration. Yeah.
All right. Since the beginning of the war, there's a lot of people who like in support, they would take their, Facebook profile picture, add a little Ukrainian flag to it and like, woohoo. I'm done. Now I've done my part, but now you're seeing a lot of people with Shiba Inus and posting about NATO and Napo.
Yeah.
What's going on?
So the guy who started it, Camille, he works for St. Javelin now, and then his kind of co-founder, we just hired him as well. So Napo, however you want to pronounce it, like it's part of St. Javelin now.
Okay.
So that whole thing started again like super innocently, just like I started St. Javelin, right? Cam basically did it as a joke because I don't even remember the origin story. He told me it once, but he made like one dog, and then people were like, "Hey, I also want a dog." And then like I saw it the first week, and I was like, "I want a dog," so we donated.
I want a dog. By the way.
And it was cool because I saw right away. I was like, "Oh, this is a really interesting thing that he's doing," because you want a dog so bad that you donate, and then you can buy. Like that money goes and buys bulletproof vests, right? So I remember Cam was tweeting and he was like, "Hey, I got like 3 bulletproof vests or whatever." And then I messaged him and I was like, "How much is a vest?" And I think he said it was like $250 or something. So we sent him a bit of money, and then he bought like 2 vests, or 2 vests with plates or whatever. And then it just became like this engine where you want a dog, you donate, things get purchased, and then it became like its own trolling thing and operation, and like chasing all these Russian sympathizers and pro-Russian accounts off of Twitter and just like harassing them. It's honestly like it's pretty remarkable what it became. Yeah, it's so funny. Yeah.
Is there any actual organization? Like, do like all the dogs get together and like target people, or is it just like they just troll and that's it?
I don't know. I don't know how much of that to disclose.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I don't know if there's like coordinate. I think people just see somebody respond to something stupid and then they just pile on.
Okay.
Basically.
Classic, yeah. Like
yeah, it's like, oh, this guy's an idiot, so like let's make fun of him, right?
Do you guys have any more plans of anything for St. Javelin, or are you just gonna basically just hop on the next thing and just like turn it into another?
We're so like that shirt. We've started to make. My goal is to turn it into something like Patagonia-esque, where it's a business with a strong social mission, which is to literally, it's printed on the office, like to help rebuild Ukraine. And we make as many of the things that we can make in Ukraine so that like the maximum economic benefits put back into Ukraine, right? So we started to actually do that. And then what we're doing now is try not just t-shirts and shit like that and stickers, but actually come up with and figure out like how do you make really good stuff that soldiers and like professionals will wear in the future, like base layers and really comfortable t-shirts and stuff like that. So you're not just buying St. Javelin because you support Ukraine, but you're buying St. Javelin in 5 years because like we have good stuff. And also you love the fact that we do all of these things for Ukrainian organizations, right? I don't know exactly what it's going to look like in 5 years, but that's what we're working towards. Like we're literally starting production of like base layer, like St. Javelin base layers and stuff like that. And then we're just donating. But right now we're donating balaclavas and beanies and socks and base layers to Ukrainian soldiers. And then in the future, like we can learn from that, from the production of that, do it all in Ukraine, and instead of like making shit in China, we make it in Ukraine, right? And we make like really good stuff in Ukraine, and then we just hopefully become a business that lasts a long time. So if it goes from like if it goes from that to that, it'd be pretty incredible.
That'd be a ridiculous story.
Yeah.
I love the dogs in the middle of it too. Just
the dogs, we haven't figured out exactly what like the trajectory of the dogs is going to be yet, but the dogs might just keep being like a funny thing. I don't know.
Let them loose.
Some guy emailed us yesterday and said like, hey, I want to make skis with your designs on them, and like skis, like they're one of the biggest ski manufacturers in the US, and they want to make like St. Javelin skis. And those are things that I never thought about, right?
Yeah.
Like coffee, and like people want us to do, somebody tried to steal our trademark and make vodka, and then like our audience fucking just went after them and shamed them into dropping it. So now they turned it into Javelin vodka, which I'm sure they're going to get a call from Lockheed Martin soon about that too. So I honestly, there's things that like we're trying to move in the direction of and stick to that. But then there's also all these other opportunities that come about, right? Like just yesterday, somebody emailed and said, hey, we want to distribute your products in a country in the EU, which I haven't thought of that at all, right? But imagine St. Javelin is in your department store in your city, right? Like that's, and that's how you kind of become that kind of like Patagonia-esque brand, right? It's like, hey, St. Javelin's actually available at the mall, not just online. So
that's very cool.
I don't know.
My brain was just like, oh, wow.
it could be a lot of things. Like we have this war parts thing. So sitting over there is like a piece of a BMP that somebody gave me when I was in Kiev in April. And it's like it's put as a trophy because we're giving it to somebody who donated a considerable sum of money. But we have the whole like war parts operation being built up, and then like you'll be able to buy pieces of destroyed Russian equipment. So it's like we're literally taking that shit that Russia left behind and using it to help rebuild. So that's a completely different thing from the clothing side, but like that's another thing that we can do, right?
It's like recycling it into like something like
dog tags, dog tags,
tags.
Keychains, like I don't know, like rings. Like there's so many. Somebody was messaging us and saying that in Vietnam, the Americans had like POW bracelets, and they were suggesting that we do stuff like that. So there's so many things that we can do, right? It's just we don't have 1,000 people doing it, so we have to figure out how do we do things that we can do and like focus on that instead of trying to go in 100 directions.
True. Okay, it's Christian Boris, St. Javelin after 24.